Ladies, gentlemen, and miniatures of all ages, Grounded 2 has plenty of different things that you can use to make yourself more powerful, and among those, the one that requires the most luck, or at least knowledge of what you're looking for, is the Trinkets. These can have pretty major effects on your overall gameplay, depending on which one you have equipped, and while some of them you can just easily make through crafting recipes you'll unlock naturally, others are hidden behind random drops, or some are left in specific locations, so today we're going to talk about all 17 Trinkets that currently exist in Grounded 2's early access, what they do, where to find them, and I'll talk about which ones are generally the best for maximizing your offensive power in various build archetypes. And we've also got a big important trick to take advantage of when hunting for the random drop trinkets too. That said, let's start off with the crafted trinkets, as those are the easiest to discuss. Most of these are just unlocked as you analyze a related resource, and then can be crafted at the workbench itself. The Nifty Needle is a boost to damage from fully charged bow shots. The specific amount it gives you is 10% extra damage, which isn't bad by any means. It'll make more sense with the context when we get to the other trinket that mainly affects bows, but right now there are only a couple of trinkets that really work for bows, and they are both very good for different reasons. So this is either the best or second best bow trinket as the best way of ranking it. Next up then we've got the Sturdy Shell. This is made from acorn materials, and this one is very niche. The effect itself is a 50% reduction in friendly fire damage taken in exchange for increased threat generation. Friendly fire damage only exists in the WoW difficulty right now, and is only really a concern in multiplayer as well on that difficulty, so outside of that specific scenario, this has incredibly small amounts of value. That said, the threat generation increase can be fun to mess around with for a tanky setup in multiplayer if you want to protect your friends, and on WoW mode it can help you out a little bit in general, but generally I rate this trinket quite low among the current options, unless of course you want to specifically do PvP with your friends in WoW mode. Then we've got the Astonishing Acid trinket as well, and this is made from acid glands as the main material you have to analyze to find out the actual recipe, and I've also heard people say that this one does have a random drop chance from any insect that's possible to drop acid glands from as a secondary way of getting the trinket, but it is an easy enough craft regardless, and most people are likely to see it this way first. What this does then is even simpler than the description makes it out to be. It increases the damage of your combo finisher with melee attacks by 10%. This again does only apply to melee weapons, and the actual 10% damage boost isn't bad by any means, but this trinket will simply be outclassed by other options that you unlock later on. Then we have the crafted trinkets that require a little bit more unlocking. The O.R.C Nullifier requires you to hit brain power level 6 before you get the recipe. This is achieved by just analyzing loads and loads of resources that you haven't seen beforehand. This one, when crafted, is built to debuff any O.R.C enemies that you fight, which already makes it quite niche as O.R.C enemies are only a small portion of the things you fight in the game. The specific effect is, with the trinket equipped, when you hit an O.R.C enemy, they have their damage reduced by 20% for 5 seconds. So if you hit them every 5 seconds, permanent significant damage reduction from them. This is okay for certain situations like O.R.C based bosses or higher health pool O.R.C enemies, but most of the O.R.C enemies you'll fight are tiny and in multiples, which makes this one sort of meh, especially when compared to our next trinket and what that does to O.R.C enemies, the Volatile Capacitor. The recipe for this is unlocked when you hit brain power level 9, which I believe is currently the highest brain power level you can get right now. The trinket itself is also fairly strong. I would say it's one of the best for melee just in the game right now, and especially for fast attacking melee weapons like the dual wield type weapons, and even stronger when fighting O.R.C enemies to be precise. The exact effect is that it adds flat shock damage to every attack, 15 flat damage on every hit to be precise, which is really good on quick weapons because then you proc that more often, but then also it has a secondary effect that makes any charged attacks against O.R.C enemies create an AoE burst shockwave effect for 50 damage in an AoE, which is an actually quite massive little chunk there. This one is a very solid trinket in general, but is also a direct counter to the big mixer event that we currently have in the game, which makes it worth even more in that specific spot. And so I'd say overall this is probably top 2 to 3 trinkets in the game right now for melee. That does it for the crafted trinkets then, but that is only a small portion of what is actually in the game for trinkets. There are 12 more that we haven't talked about so far. Next up, we've got trinkets that are in preset locations. You have to go out and find them in the world, but if you know where they are, they will always be there. First is the Myrmecologist Token. This one is super early in the snack bar anthill on your map, the area that you first are shown to, the really shallow anthill that you first learn about buggy riding inside of right at the start of the story. The chest on the ground beside the dead body has this trinket inside of it. Most people will have found it because you are brought here through the story and it's a very clear chest, but just to mention it in case you don't have it and want to know. The effect on this one then is honestly sort of a big trick. It says increased damage to ants, which it does do, and that is nice, but the actual number on this is 10% increased damage to ants, which isn't negligible, but just isn't crazy at all for something that hyper-specific. And if that was all it did, that would still make it a useful trinket, but then it also increases your damage taken by all sources by 30%. Yes, 30%. Personally, I view this entire trinket as a trap as a result of this. Even when used against ants, their intended target, they will do more damage to you when you have this equipped than you will do to them. But I'm sure some people will want it when fighting ants specifically, even after knowing the numbers behind it, because they're sure that they can just avoid all damage. And if you can avoid all damage, then it is a positive, but it has that very specific requirement. Regardless, this is, in my opinion, probably the worst or second worst offensive trinket in the game, because it's not even just niche, it's just a really bad trade-off of stats even in its intended use case scenario. Next up, we've got the Exploitation Token. This is in the Spider Anthill, which is up by the Pine Hills area. The easiest entrance to get this from is the South Spider Den Anthill entrance up here on your map, in the lower area that is under the pine trees themselves. Once you are in here, just head forwards along the path like this until you get into the larger, more open chamber. Then you want to take a turn to the right, like I do here, and you'll find a dead body over here in the corner on the floor. If you search the body, you'll find this trinket lying down on it. The actual effect of this one is that it increases your hauling strength by 5. This means it increases the amount of things like grass planks or weed stems that you can carry on your shoulders by 5, and this is essentially just doubling the base number. But sadly, this does not seem to affect buggies that you are riding, so you cannot use this to make your buggy even better at carrying. It's just for when you're walking around on foot. The secondary effect of the trinket, though, is 50% damage reduction against spiders. It lowers your damage to spiders by 50%. So basically, you never want to have this on in combat, with spiders especially, but if you are building bases and doing a lot of running around with planks or stems in your hand rather than on your buggy, that's the specific niche that this one is actually pretty good. Then moving on, we have all of our random drop trinkets, which are split between two sources. There are creature trinkets, which means that they have a random drop chance from the different bugs, and I guess also scorpions, as scorpions aren't an insect. And for most of these, it is a 4% base drop chance when defeating the related enemy, and I will specify for any of them that is not the case. This means for those trinkets, you have to defeat an average of 25 of that insect to get that trinket. Sometimes it'll take you less, sometimes it'll take you more. It is of course random, but 25 is the average. There is a way to boost your chances, however, which is stuffed bugs. In the build menu, there are trophies on the last sort of section, and this is split between wall mounts and stuffed bugs. The wall mounts are for giving you damage increases against their insects, whereas the stuffed bugs are to give you increased drop rates from those insects. And this does also seem to affect the drop rate of the trinket specifically. So if you've, for example, killed enough bombardier beetles to get 5 parts and 1 boiling gland, and you've not had the trinket drop, it may then be worth it to craft the stuffed bombardier. Give it a rub for luck, and then keep killing bombardier beetles, now with a higher drop rate. So keep that in mind for any of these creature farmed trinkets we'll talk about specifically. That said, let's start with the bombardier related trinket itself, the Blistering Boiler. This is essentially a big upgraded version of the Astonishing Acid crafted trinket. Rather than just increasing the damage of your combo finisher for melee weapons, it instead adds a big AoE burst of 25 flat spicy damage and also 40 sizzle buildup for any enemies nearby. Having an AoE effect on your melee attacks is great for any time that you're fighting multiple enemies, and that is the vast majority of combats in the game anyways. A lot of things currently are also just weak to spicy damage, and sizzle buildup is a great bonus on top of that. So this one is a top tier trinket for melee weapons, but specifically for builds or setups where you're looking to do a lot of combo attacks and combo finishers rather than something like charge attacks. Next up is the Shivering Scale. This is a random drop chance from blue butterfly enemies in the park, and this is one of the stronger trinkets available as well. This is sort of like the fresh counterpart to the previous trinket, except instead of triggering on combo finishers, it triggers on charged attacks from melee weapons. The actual effect is very similar numerically, being 25 flat fresh damage and 40 chill buildup in an AoE around the target hit. And like how the previous one is a top tier melee trinket for combo attacking setups, this one is a pretty top tier melee trinket for charge charged attack focused setups, so they are very opposite in how they work and how you'd want to use them, but very similar in their theme and their numbers. After that, we have the Stabby Stinger trinket as well. This is a random drop chance from the big northern scorpion enemies, specifically the full adults or the orc variations too, not the juniors or the scorplings. This one makes the 3-hit combo finisher attack with melee weapons apply 20 venom buildup, which in itself is just sort of decent and it makes the enemies take damage over time, but there is also the Scorpion armor set with the double deal perk, which gives you a sizable damage increase when hitting an enemy that has venom applied, which normally only works with a couple of weapons that have natural venom buildup, but this trinket lets you do that with literally any melee weapon in the entire game and reap the benefits of this perk. So it's quite top tier with that specific synergy being used if you are using the Scorpion armor, but outside of that, this trinket is just sort of okay. Next up is the Cleaving Claw trinket. This is a random drop from praying mantis nymphs in the park. There are only a few of them at a time, and they are one of the most threatening enemy types in the game, and their trinket is maybe worth it in some scenarios. Specifically, this is a 25% boost in crit chance while using two-handed weapons only, as well as specifically the Roach Club one-hander for some reason as well, but this boost only applies if you fall under 20% of your maximum health. So 25% crit chance, which is extremely powerful if you aren't at full crit to begin with, of course, as critical scaling is a big route to high damage and grounded, but being at 20% health as a requirement is of course super dangerous to just play around in the first place. While this trinket has potential, I think we won't see it really come into its own until we have more armor sets and such to try and create proper low health synergy builds, as right now the only low health build boosting effects are this trinket and another trinket. And of course, because we only have one trinket slot, you can't use them together. But put simply, this one has a lot of offensive potential, but requires you to play very dangerously to use it properly. Next up then, we have the everlasting Hogstopper trinket. This is a sort of double up trinket as it both drops from creatures and from harvestables. Specifically, it has a 3% drop rate from any of the cockroach queen enemies in the game, of which there really aren't too many, but it also has a 1% drop chance anytime that you chop through a section of Billy Dog Hot Dog out in the world. That's obviously not a high chance at all, but it is possible to have a drop if you cut up enough hot dogs to make it happen. The actual effect of this one is just permanent passive hunger regen without having to eat food. The idea being that while this is equipped in your trinket slot, you should just not really have to worry about food all that often at all, especially if you have some hunger reduction upgrades from your milk molar. That said, that makes this one sort of top tier for its exact use. For exploration, like anytime that you're not planning on fighting anything, just having this permanently equipped in your trinket slot will make your general survival much more manageable. But you do need to make sure that you swap it out before any combat if you don't want it to just be a dead slot in that moment, because obviously you'd rather have an actual combat affecting trinket when you're fighting. Then the final creature-based trinket is the Roach Rage trinket. This one does have what seems to be a set location, which is tied to the story missions that take place in the big statue within the park. It's unmissable while you're doing them, so you should get it there if you don't get it beforehand. But I've also heard other players say that they got it from a random cockroach queen encounter that they fought elsewhere in the park, so I thought this section was the best place to put it just for full clarity. That said, the actual effect on this one is when you drop below 20% health, you get 15% increased damage for 15 seconds. This means it is another low health build component, but the 15% increased damage will generally be worth less than the 25% crit that you would get from Cleaving Claws, unless you are already having full crit chance anyways. And the fact that it has a duration instead of just staying active the whole time you're at low health is really sort of funky to play around too, and not in a good way. Generally speaking, I consider this trinket pretty low tier, at least at the current moment, but it is worth mentioning it is, I think, the only trinket that technically affects the candy staff weapon type as far as boosting their offense, as every other trinket we've talked about so far does not work with candy staves. Even the Cleaving Claw, which has two-handed weapons, is specifying the weapon category called two-handed weapons in the crafting menu, not things like candy staves, which you do wield in two hands but technically don't count in that way. But this one technically does work for candy staves if you do trigger the effect. For that specific reason, it gains quite a bit of niche usefulness, but outside of candy staves specifically, it is pretty low tier right now, in my opinion, for combat-focused trinkets. Following that, we have 4 more trinkets to talk about, these ones also being random drops, but much rarer random drops and also from a different source, which is harvestables. This means that you cannot boost drop chances with stuffed bugs, which sucks, and you have to sort of work around the resource respawn timers to farm them properly as well. First up is the fancy Fletching. This is a random drop when you break crow feathers, 2% chance I believe each time, and in Grounded 2 this gives you 15% faster charge time on your bow attacks. The only real point of comparison is the Nifty Needle, as it's the only other properly bow affecting trinket, which is a 10% damage boost on your charge shots, but 15% faster charge should realistically result in more damage than a 10% damage boost over an elongated fight. So anything like boss fights, this is just going to end up being purely better than the Nifty Needle always, especially as it means that you can get shots out in openings that you may not have been able to otherwise, because it is a speed increase for the animation itself. But if you are trying to run a heavy ambush focused build, like opening shot damage build, then it's the situation where Nifty Needle would be better. Basically, these two trinkets are both top 2 for bow, it's just a matter of what your exact goals are and how you're fighting. Then we have the Suspicious Mint trinket as well. This is a 2% drop chance whenever you break open a mint within the park. This means on average 1 in 50 mints broken will have this trinket exist, which is not a small amount of mints you have to break by any means. The effect on this is basically an offshoot of the Volatile Capacitor crafted trinket, and that it adds flat damage to every melee attack that you do. Specifically, it is 15 fresh damage on top of any attack, and because it's fresh damage instead of shock, this means it also is either weakened against enemies that are resistant to fresh, or strengthened against enemies that are weak to fresh. This means it is a top tier trinket for fast attacking weapons against anything that is specifically weak against fresh. Outside of that, it's a bit less good. The direct counterpart for this then is the Spectacular Spicy Shard. This is a 2% drop chance whenever you break open a spicy candy, so again, an average of 1 trinket drop per 50 spicy candies that you pop open. The effect is exactly the same, but spicy damage, so a bonus flat 15 spicy damage added on top of every single melee attack you do while this is equipped. This means it is a top tier trinket for fast attacking weapons against anything that is weak to spicy damage, but outside of that, it's not quite as good. Generally speaking, I would say Volatile Capacitor is the sort of general use version of these flat damage trinkets, and then the mint you want for specifically things that are weak against fresh, and the Spicy Shard you want to get as things that are specifically weak to spicy damage. But again, this mostly only applies to fast attacking setups to begin with. Then we have the final trinket, which is the Fluffy Dandelion Tuft. This is a 5% drop rate whenever you chop down a dandelion, meaning on an average, you should have this drop within 20 dandelions being chopped down. The actual effect on it is very simple. It's exactly like having a bunch of the Dandelion Tuft consumable, and essentially an infinite amount, because what the Dandelion Tuft allows you to do is essentially use it like a glider. It lets you fall from a high distance safely by pressing shift on keyboard, except this one is a trinket, which means it has infinite uses rather than having to be a consumable like the regular Tufts. This one is another top tier exploration and travel trinket specifically, because especially just because you can sit it in your backpack and not have it equipped until the exact moment that you need it to jump off of something high, then you can slot it in momentarily and get the full value from it. You just need to make sure that you don't forget to equip it before jumping off of something high up, or else that would be pretty bad. That pretty much does it for today, everyone. All 17 trinkets currently in Grounded 2, where to get them, how to get them, and what they actually do, with numbers wherever possible as well. Then we're just talking about how good each of them is and in what situation they are best, to try and help you get a general feel for which trinkets are worth going out of your way to get, depending on how you want to play the game. Just for the sake of a more condensed ranking for those wanting it visualized a bit, all of the trinkets on the top row here are incredible for their specific use against the majority of enemies in the game, or just great at their specific purpose. The second row here is either niche use or just sort of decent trinkets that don't really affect combat. Third row is ones that I would only use in very rare specific situations and very specific builds as well. And then the final row is just ones that I feel are just plain bad, honestly. Roach Rage I do not have on this save, but would go in the third row here, specifically because for the most part it's not good, except the fact that it does work for candy stab, so it does have some relevance in that way. I hope you've all enjoyed this and hopefully it helps you out in building your own trinket collection moving forwards. Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world our stage. Goodbye.